First part of session 55. Let's talk about the negative path with the Orion group and the dark side of the Force. Let's begin. All right, we're on to session 55, which actually is a pretty good session for me because it creates a good division between the two parts that I'm going to have to do for this whole session. And this first part is going to be concerned with the negative path, like I said. And the second part is going to be about pyramids, because we haven't talked about pyramids in almost 2 years, at least in this series. And I think for like 40 sessions already, we haven't touched on pyramids, at least not dedicated. So that's going to be the second part. As for this first part, it's going to start with Don asking. I did include the first question this time because it's sort of relevant. There's, it's not the usual answer that Ra would give, that Carla was just in her usual condition. And so we can go read it right away. We have 8 questions prepared for this first part, so we'll start with the first one, like I said, of Don saying, I would first like to ask as to the condition of the instrument, please. And Ra says, this instrument is experiencing physical distortions toward weakness of the bodily complex occurring due to psychic attack. This instrument's vital energies have not been affected. However, due to the aid of those present in healing work, this instrument will apparently be subject to such weakness distortions due to incarnative processes which predispose the body complex towards weakness distortions. So, here's the first part. I think it has been for a couple of sessions already that this negative entity, this is just like history of the contact itself and how they were being attacked or greeted, as they used to call it, by the negative entity of Orion group, which coincidentally is, the first part of the questions, but I don't think Don had that in mind. In any case, synchronicity, I guess, that they were being informed. See, I don't remember in the other sessions that Ra mentioned. Maybe they alluded that there was some sort of attack. I don't know. I have to go back and check. But at least this is pretty plain and obvious, where Ra is saying that Carla was experiencing some physical distortions toward weakness due to the psychic attack. And now this has to do with physical energy. See, Ra says this instrument's vital energies have not been affected, which means that is her physical energy that was affected. And she was not affected due to the aid of those present in healing work, which I guess it was Don and Jim. This instrument will apparently be subject to such weakness distortions due to incarnative processes, which predispose the body complex to weakness distortions, which is what Carla mentioned so many times, that she had, obviously, as you said, I think Ra mentioned it too, that she had chosen to pre-incarnative choices, of course. She chose to have a weak body so she could dedicate herself to her spiritual work, which makes sense. And Carla did mention that a lot. She had a lot of arthritis towards the end. She had, and amazingly, she wrote books with all her limitations. Just shows you the will of wanting to do something. So yeah, this is the situation, and it was exacerbated. Even though it's physical, it was exacerbated by this Orion entity of 5th density, which was attracted to the contact because of the exchange of information, the light, you would call it, that was being exchanged between Ra and the group. So they did everything to try to discourage the contact or to interrupt it or even try to kill Carla, which is amazing. But this is the situation so far. Don's gonna ask, as usual, very caring person. He said, is there any specific thing that we can do that you have already told us, or otherwise to alleviate this psychic attack or to help the instrument the most? And Ra says, we scan this instrument and find its distortion towards appreciation of each entity and each entity's caring, as you may call it. This atmosphere, shall we say, offers the greatest contrast to the discomfort of such psychic attacks, being the reciprocal, that is, the atmosphere of psychic support. This each of you do as a subconscious function of true attitudinal, mental, emotional, and spiritual distortions towards this instrument. There is no magic greater than honest distortion towards love. I think this is beautiful because first, everybody's different. Let's start with that. Everybody's different, and that even though we are under the same principles, everybody has a different appreciation for love, for beauty, let's call it. And so Ra says that they check on Carla and find her distortion for appreciation of each entity and each entity's caring. So the caring of people for her. And that's how I read it, at least. And this atmosphere, the atmosphere that they had, reveals a little bit more why Ra could contact them. There's a passage that I don't remember. I think it was from session 14, where Ra mentioned that it was due to Carla and Don. This goes to the people that may ask me sometimes, like, is it possible that Ra can be channeled? Is it possible that some of the people that claim to be channeling Ra is actually Ra who's calling? Question is, we don't know. But one of the things that stand out when I read the material is that Ra did say that they were able to contact them because Carla and Don basically had been doing a lot of preliminary work, preparing for that contact, unknowingly, with all the channeling that they did, 8 years prior to this. And the balance that they had along with Jim. It was the perfect piece. Jim was the perfect piece. And I believe even Jim has said that the best way to channel is with 3 people or more. So, they needed 3. So in any case, this is the atmosphere that Ra's talking about, at least in my books, which offers the greatest contrast to the discomfort of such psychic attacks. So it's a good balance, for the psychic attacks that they were getting, being the reciprocal of the atmosphere of the psychic support. So it's there's a similar amount of energy being invested in the group to try to discourage the attack as there is to continue the contact. Then Ra says, this each of you do as a subconscious function of true attitudinal, mental, emotional, and spiritual distortion towards this instrument. So you see, there is here's the question from Don saying, can we do something? Is there anything we could do? Ritual, meditation, some active function, active activity. Sounds redundant, but you know what I mean. Something that I can do. And Ra says, subconscious first. Each of you have a subconscious, true attitudinal, from attitude. It's a subconscious attitude, something that naturally happens. Anything subconscious is being done automatically, basically. You subconsciously move your feet when you're walking. You're not thinking about it. You're not doing the walking. You're subconsciously doing. So in the same way, subconsciously, they had an attitude, a mental and an emotional predisposition, spiritual as well, towards Carla. And the reason why I'm emphasizing all of this is because Sometimes we get caught in the idea that we have to do something. We must do something. What can I do to improve this or to improve that? I call this the outer to inner world, as opposed to the inner to the outer world. I'll explain myself. Things work both ways, you know, but it seems to take longer, at least to me, it seems to take longer to work from the outer world to the inner world, because you're trying to use something very impermanent and not really you to affect the inside, and it just takes longer to me. I'll give you an example. Affirmations. Obviously, nothing wrong with affirmations. People should do it, or people, if they feel called, they should do it. I've never done affirmations because they simply didn't resonate with my way of thinking. I was more I guess, concerned with my own thoughts and my own process. But in any case, affirmations do work. However, it's not the same as following what you want to do. Following what you want to do, and, you know, have faith in what's happening, as opposed to, you know, doing this repetitive work until it finally sinks into your mind and saying, you know, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. If you were worthy, you wouldn't be saying it. So the affirmation works from the outside, where you don't believe it, and you have to tell to yourself that, and then it becomes a sort of subconscious thing, because you have said it so much, then it starts becoming something like, yeah, of course I deserve this because I am worthy. It works. So, but if it's subconscious and you just feel that you're worthy, you just feel it. You don't need any proof outside. You know, you're not measuring your worthiness. You just simply know you're worthy. You feel it. And that's a different thing, because you don't have to spend energy on it. You just know it. So this is why I'm emphasizing this part, which I think is obvious. Not obvious. It's awful. Awful. My God, where are my words today? It's awful, the things I'm saying. It's awesome. That's the word I was looking for. Go away, Orion. All right. The last thing that I think is great here, and I think it's the best phrase, is when Ra says, there is no magic greater than honest distortion toward love. Yeah, I cannot speak today. There is no magic greater than honest distortion toward love. Beautiful. I don't think I have to say anything there. Just, there is no magic greater than honest. Just, it's not something that you're saying to yourself or that you're trying to convince yourself. It's just something that you are. And is any distortion, every distortion toward love, to me, is beauty. How you appreciate beauty. You know, we don't have to agree on beauty, yet we all have the same feeling when we appreciate beauty. And so whatever distortion you have towards beauty, that's it. All right, now we're going to get into the real meat of this session, or at least this first part. Question 3, Don says, thank you. I want to ask a couple of questions about previous material that I didn't understand. I'm hoping that this will clear up my understanding somewhat with respect to the mental configurations with which we have been dealing. Don says, in the session before last, you stated, quote, however, this is a risk for the Orion entities due to the frequency with which the harvestable negative planetary entities then attempt to bid or order the Orion contact, just as these entities bid planetary negative contacts. That was Ra saying that. Then Don continues, can you explain the mechanisms that affect polarization in consciousness with respect to this statement? So it's Ra's going to say, the negative polarization is greatly aided by the subjugation or enslavement of other cells. The potential between two negatively polarized entities is such that the entity which enslaves the other or bids the other gains in negative polarity. So let me make a pause here because Ra has more to say. And first, the word bid was one that if English is your second language like me, I had a little trouble, especially translating for for the Spanish project that we have, translating the word bid. Because I don't know, to me bid sounds like auction, and there is a sort of connection there. But the thing is that bidding is a synonym for ordering. Like when you read or listen to Old English, when they say thy bidding, it's, you know, like a servant telling their master your orders, or I await your bidding, or thy bidding be done. You know, it's like your orders, that sort of thing. That's what they mean here in the context of, we're talking about now negative entities, incarnated negative entities, and the Orion Group entity, which is trying to establish contact. Okay, that's the contact that exists between a negative entity, human negative entity, and a Orion Group entity from 4th density, most likely. Could be 5th density, but mostly 4th density is it's my opinion with what I know. Mostly 4th density. So bidding just means that. It's ordering, it's controlling. It's not controlling, but is, you know, the order. The there was another word that I use in Spanish, which is sort of dominating, or the dominion that somebody may have, or attempt to dominate. And so we're gonna see that word a lot here. And so let me go back to what Don said. Don just wanted to know again something that Ra said, that the risk for the Orion entity, we're talking about the 4th density, let's just call it 4th density entity of the Orion Group, due to the frequency with which the harvestable negative planetary entities then attempt to bid order the Orion contact, just as these entities bid planetary negative contacts. So there's a risk, and Ra's going to explain that. And Don wants to know the mechanism that affect polarization and consciousness with respect to this. So there's a double polarization, or possible polarization or depolarization from both entities. And there's actually more risk of depolarization from the 4th density, or the negative Orion Group entity. Anyhow, let's untangle all this mess. Ross says the negative polarization is greatly aided by the subjugation or enslavement of other selves. So this is the potential in polarization that a negative entity has, 4th density, Orion Group, has by enslaving humans. Okay, let's just put that scenario. The Orion Group and the elite here in our planet, they have been contacting for thousands of years the Orion Group, and they have been benefiting from this negative philosophy. So what's happening? The human, the elite, contacts and improves the contact with these negative entities, and they become slaves to them. So in essence, what the Orion Group entity does is say, hey, here's the negative philosophy, implement it so that we may benefit. We work this way, and you are my slave. They don't say it like that, even though it's sort of implicit. They should all know. But, you know, the human here benefiting from the power and control and the techniques and all these tools that they give to manipulate society, they benefit greatly, and they receive their physical reward in terms of dominion, having an empire, having a church, having control, just simply having power over others. That's the negative philosophy. So the negative entity in the Orion Group receives an increment in polarization because now they control more. Remember, the game of the negative entity is to control others, to manipulate them. And this is done to a great extent by imparting their negative philosophy, which is the ways in which to divide, conquer, dominate, control, manipulate it, etc. And so they receive, you can see this metaphysically as a negative entity is so polarized, and when it controls more people, it absorbs their energy. It's like a suction of the energy, which is one, but they're absorbing them for themselves. It's a very ego-driven path. That's a negative path. Your ego is inflating. Now you feel like you control civilizations and planets and all this. You are feeling that energy of God, of being, the master of the universe. And that's how it goes. All right. So Ra says the potential between two negatively polarized entities is such that the entity which enslaves the other or bids the other gains in negative polarity. Now, they're presenting both entities, human and fourth density, as equal in terms of polarization. Depending on their polarization, they will gain depending on how much they bid the other. Okay? Now we're seeing a sort of the contest that's going to take place now between the negative human and the negative fourth density. Now check what happens. Ra says, the entity so bidden or enslaved in serving an other self will necessarily lose negative polarity, although it will gain in desire for further negative polarization. This desire will then tend to create opportunities to regain negative polarity. So, again, let's just establish that there is the fourth density master and the third density elite negative polarized entity, which you can put any name that you want, current or old ones that we know from society and our history. Let's put Genghis Khan or Taras Bulba or even Rasputin, just to stay with the raw material. So they are benefiting indirectly because the negative entity from fourth density is enslaving them. And even though they're losing polarization because they're serving their master, they gain potential, or what do they say, opportunities to regain negative polarity by desire to further negative. See, I'm going backwards here. Let me just reread it backwards. This desire, the desire for further negative polarization, see, they say, although it will gain in desire for further negative polarization, even though they lose polarity to the master, they will gain desire for further negative polarization, and this desire will then tend to create opportunities to regain negative polarity. Now, what are these opportunities? Well, of course, if you get the negative polarity, the negative philosophy, let's just say me. For some reason, I decided to go negative. And in my village, I say, well, I'm going to channel negative entities and I'm going to control the village. And so I will lose some of my polarization to my master. And my master is going to gain it. However, once I get the philosophy from him, her, that I will use it to regain polarity. Like they said, they can regain negative polarity by the opportunities that are presented by this negative philosophy. So now I'll go to my village and start creating scenarios, some really hanky-panky, heavy-duty stuff, and I will be, controlling and manipulating them to my own designs. It's a free world. I can do whatever I want, and so I will control them. Now I'm getting polarity again. You see? So this is how the hierarchy works. The masters always gain and the servants always lose, but at the same time gain opportunities to continue to gain polarity. So this is their scheme. The pyramid scheme, literally. There's more to say though. This gets darker and darker. So I love it. Yes, the law of one does not belong to negative or positive one. That's why I love it, because it shows us everything as it is and doesn't sugarcoat anything. I love Ra. Alright, so Don says in question 4, am I to understand then just the fact that the third density entity on this planet Just the fact that he calls or bids an Orion Crusader is a polarizing type of action that affects both entities. This is incorrect, as Ra says, and they say the calling mechanism is not congruent in the slightest degree with the bidding mechanism. They explain, in the calling, the entity which calls is a suppliant. Suppliant? I'm not sure. Let's just say suppliant. No, suppliant. Alright. The entity which calls is a suppliant, neophyte, asking for aid in negative understanding. If you may excuse this misnomer. The misnomer being understanding. I'll throw in an Easter egg after I'm done here. The Orion response increases its negative polarity as it is disseminating the negative philosophy, thereby enslaving or bidding the entity calling. Alright, Easter egg out of the way. Ra says, I think I've mentioned this before, but Ra, towards the later sessions, they started saying, excuse the misnomer whenever we use the word understanding. They never said this exactly as I said it, but you can intuit from where they say always, excuse the misnomer, or if you forgive us for the use of this word misapplied, or something like that. Every time they use the word understanding. Why? Because this density is not of understanding. So, this is not the density of understanding. I think that's for density. But we're getting there. So we're starting to understand a little bit more. Alright, so Ra is kind of explaining why Don is incorrect in how he saw that simply calling will create polarization. And so, what Ra is saying is the calling mechanism is not congruent, of course, in the slightest with the bidding mechanism, which is really what creates polarization, the bidding mechanism, like trying to control, the desire to control and manipulate others. That's what makes it like that. So that's not congruent at all. And they say, in the calling, just in the simple calling, like me in my example, trying to control the village, I will call the negative entity. So the entity which calls me is a suppliant. The word suppliant, it's like applicant. And I've actually never read the word in English, but I can tell you that sup comes from sub, and sub is just a prefix that we use for something under. So a suppliant, just like supplicant, when you supplicate, you are reducing yourself humbly, and you're just going under the asking, or what you are trying to join with. That's what that plicare in Latin, if I remember correctly from my Spanish, it's like to join. It comes from the root to join, or to add, and so to create. In any case, that's what suppliant means. It's a suppliant neophyte. Neophyte just means uninformed, ignored, ignorant. And so the suppliant's a neophyte asking for aid in negative understanding, just wants to know the negative philosophy. You know, here I am, and I say, I feel this urge to control these baboons, so I'm going to ask, God, Satan, the higher forces, and I'm going to control them. And so I just don't know. How can I get this understanding? And so the Orion response increases its negative polarity as it is disseminating the negative philosophy. That fourth density that comes here, probably fifth too, but I'm calling it fourth. The Orion group, or the Orion entity, is coming here and gaining polarity simply by disseminating philosophy. And, for that, there needs to be a calling. Thereby enslaving or bidding the entity calling. I'm going to become enslaved. I'm going to become their lackey. And so I'm going to do whatever they say. And so they'll tell me, do this, do that, create this, create that, and control this way or the other. So that's what's happening so far. Now, things are going to turn a little bit. And Ra says, there are instances, however, when the contact becomes a contest, which is prototypical of negativity. In this contest, the caller will attempt not to ask for aid, but to demand results. Since the third density negatively oriented harvestable entity has at its disposal an incarnative experiential nexus, and since Orion Crusaders are, in a great extent, bound by the first distortion in order to progress, the Orion entity is vulnerable to such bidding, if properly done. So here is where there is the possibility, and here's the risk that Ra was talking about from the Orion group. It's rare that it happens, but it will happen. It certainly will happen, and I'm sure it has happened many times in the past, especially here on Earth. And what am I talking about? The instance in which the contact, as opposed, see, me, I control not the village anymore, but I control more. I don't know. I don't want to say a whole country or a society or whatever. I am one of those really dark elite people in the world, and I control so much that I'm so into my negative philosophy that I want to control now my master. This happens, and that's what Ra is saying. And they want to demand results. So I will create this contest and demand results from these beings, and they would have to do my bidding because they created a sort of contract with me, and they're bound, like Ra says, by the first distortion, which is free will, and the Orion entity is vulnerable to such bidding if properly done. We're gonna get into that. So just get that idea that the slave can become the master in this case, as long as there is a game of ordering. If I become so powerful, I can certainly do that, and this has happened. I'm sure. I don't have examples, I don't have information about it, but I'm pretty sure it has happened before. We're gonna see why I speculate this. Ra finishes question 4 and says, in this case, the third density entity becomes master, and the Orion Crusader becomes entrapped and can be bid. This is rare, however, when it has occurred, the Orion entity or social memory complex involved has experienced loss of negative polarity in proportion to the strength of the bidding third density entity. So I don't have much to say here because I explained kind of everything else that I have in my head. But wow, this is incredible. This is how dark things operate at that level of negativity. The whole social memory complex involved will experience loss of negative polarity. Now, I would think that at the point that the social memory complex loses, let me rephrase that. At the point in which the third density entity is, the Orion group, let's just call it the Orion group. It's a social memory complex, any social memory complex actually could do this. Lose polarity. They actually have the potential of regaining all of that if the entity is graduated and decides to go with that corporation, that empire. I don't know, that's just my guess. But in any case, at that point, they're losing polarity. The whole social memory complex. And it's relative to the strength, right? What do they say? In proportion to the strength of the bidding third density entity. So this actually gives me another hint as to why I think this has happened here on Earth, is because we have, despite all of the positivity that we obviously have, there is a lot of negative philosophy in place, which means that a lot of the things that have happened here must have happened through the bidding of these Orion group entities that have been aiding the population, the negative population, which is very small, by the way. People get scared and think that there's a lot of negativity going on. Sure, there's actually not a lot of negativity. And I think, I can't quote Ra, but I know they mentioned something like, what we experience is the silent terror, I think, or horror, the silent horror that we're experiencing here, because there is silence. You know, people absorb all this negativity and don't say anything, or don't do anything. You know, and all you need to do is do what your heart tells you. You know, don't be afraid. But we are afraid. We're a population that is always afraid. If you need proof of that, look back at 2020. There's so much fear still. And so, you know, we need to cleanse all of that fear first before we can move on. As long as there's fear, there is fertile territory for the Orion group to do whatever they want here. And rightly so. I mean, if the land is fertile, then we will harvest that. And anyhow, I'm going on a rant here philosophically about the status of our planet, but the point is that, you know, there is a lot of not negativity, but fertile territory for fear, which is the background for negative polarization. And so those who are here, the few that are here, will still use that and continue to work with their masters in the way they are. So, in any case, let's move on, where Don, very acute, says, you mentioned that this will work when the bidding is properly done. What did you mean by when the bidding is properly done? Good question. It's going to give context here. And oh, I love the 555. Actually, 5 5s right now on your screen. Session 55, 55.5. Synchronicities for all of you. So Ra says, to properly bid is to be properly negative. The percentage of thought and behavior involved in service to self must approach 99% in order for a third density negative entity to be properly configured for such a contest of bidding. Boom. So this describes perfectly how a negative entity, I believe that there have been quite a few negative entities being harvested in the past centuries by the negative philosophy. But to imagine 99% service to self, an entity like that, I don't know, I just don't have imagination for that. I mean, I can imagine all kinds of, you know, evil things, evil, quote unquote, things that could happen or that somebody can do, but this is the percentage that somebody needs to achieve in order to enslave their masters, 4th density masters or 5th density. It's quite rare, as Ra says, but it happens. So when I read this, I just get, you know, in awe of how somebody can be this way. It's incredible, but that is what's needed, you know, for you to become a real master in the negative sense. 99% service to self. I can contemplate this in some, I don't know, I get chills of imagining this, but this is what it is. So yeah, that is the properly configuration for an entity to contest such a bidding, and, you know, win the bidding contest between master and servant or slave. Anyhow, just food for thought. Don says, what method of communication with the Orion entity would a negative bidder of this type use? I think I read that. Did I read that properly? What method of communication with the Orion entity would a negative bidder of this type use? Okay, what method of communication is used by a negative entity with the Orion group, right? Okay. So Ra says in question 6. The two most usual types of bidding are: 1. The use of perversions of sexual magic. 2. The use of perversions of ritual magic. In each case, the key to success is the purity of the will of the bidder. The concentration upon victory over the servant must be nearly perfect. Wow. Okay. So, I am not familiar with any of these methods, rituals, whatever it is. Rituals. Perversions of sexual magic. That's a ritual. The use of perversion of ritual magic. So, I mean, I can only think there's something, because I come from a country, Venezuela, for those who don't know, that is sort of heavy on Santeria. Santeria comes from the word santo, which is saint in English, and they have all sort of deities, which are local. Some are local, others are regional. I mean, continental. I mean, like, I forget. There's one, Yamaya, I think is one of them. And I think Yamaya is like the goddess of water. I mean, they perverse all these entities, which are neutral, really. It's not that they're neutral. Let me put it in another way. They have been created by spiritual people. And so they use that as a sort of communication. I think this is a very naive pursuit of the negative philosophy. I mean, negative entities have a feast with these people because they can manipulate them, they can use them, and they do all kinds of perversion. They really do. And I'll give you some examples of that. Sacrifice, even. People go crazy. And yeah, I'm going to share some of these stories, which I unfortunately, I don't have many. But I know how things work this way. And as a kid, I used to be terrified of these things. I mean, you could feel the energy. I didn't know anything about spirituality, but as a kid, you feel the energy. You know that something just feels creepy. But this is how they work. They contact entities. They do rituals in which to contact entities by sacrificing animals, mostly, and they use some chantings and possessions. You can see possessions there, all kinds of weird stuff. And what's happening is that the Orion group, or the Orion entities, are coming to provide, what they're being asked in favor of something else. And they will allow sacrifice and all kinds of stuff. I'm pretty sure they have human sacrifice there to some degree. I don't know. I never got into it. I only heard from I had an uncle actually who was really into this. And funny enough, he actually committed suicide, but it was something different. I can't say I'm sure, but there has to be a relationship there between all the work that he did. And he was a very kind soul too. I'm not sure why he got into this. He wasn't trying to manipulate others or anything. He was just a very empty person. He lacked a lot. Very unworthy. He felt very unworthy. And he got into all this stuff for years. And this is where I remember going into his room, and he had all these figurines of saints and Indians and things like that they worship. And I know they go there, people like my uncle used to go there for magic, for asking things, asking for money or for a wife or for health or whatever it is, and if you are deep into this, actually his wife died too. All crazy stuff happens here. This is really insane. And I know some of you know about this stuff because I've talked to some of you and you tell me about how in different parts of the world there's still, this shamanism, which is really dark magic, is the use of these means of the Orion entities to obtain something here, physical, and you pay the price. So this is just Santeria. I mean, this is not the level of purity. I love when Ra says the level. See how they say, in each case, the key to success is the purity of the will of the bidder. So you have to be very pure. And here's where the word, some people may say, oh, how come is Ra using the word pure for negative entities? Well, the level of purity only means how connected you are with intelligent infinity. Now remember, negative entities have contact with intelligent infinity. They do this by manipulating, controlling, and just simply repressing their heart, closing their heart, controlling as much as possible the lower energy centers, and that sort of jumps into the indigo ray, and they make contact with intelligent infinity. So this is what they mean by purity, the purity of the will of the bidder to ask for this stuff. So the concentration upon victory over the servant must be nearly perfect. So I don't think, maybe wrong, but I don't think little groups like these people that are into Santeria, you know, some of them may be really negative, but I don't think they get to the point that they can control, because they give me the impression that they really just, you know, they're all slaves. They fear their masters, you know, and they have this worshiping. You don't worship your slave, and so you have to have a level of purity, which I think it's actually accomplished by those, and not to bring, I mean, we're talking about very dark stuff here, so why not? The government officials who are involved, well, funny enough, speaking of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, I'm going on a limp here, so, but in any case, why not? Talking about Santeria, Chavez, the president slash dictator of Venezuela, was actually involved heavily on this dark magic stuff. You guessed it, he died of cancer. I don't know, might have been that, who knows? But there's a lot of dark stuff being done in our countries, in all of our countries. This is happening all over the world. This is not just like my country. I just know it because I am from there, and I get news and read stuff. Like, they recently returned a huge stone that was spiritual stone for, you know, from our peoples, from the indigenous tribes, and they just took it because they said, oh, you know, we're just gonna send it somewhere in, and I think it was an offering for another sect that exists in Europe. It gets really creepy at this point, but they were involved in that. Now I think that them, and maybe not maybe, certainly those in the biggest elites, which are residing in Europe and here in China, here in the United States, possibly in Russia, Japan, who knows, whatever there is this high intensity of dark energy work, there will be, to me, those who are 99% service to self and who can actually bend the will of their masters. And so, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that, because I mean, we're talking about negative stuff here. I don't I don't think I can do much but just to reflect upon the things that I know, and show you, you know, these are the paths for the negative path. Question 7, Don says, can you tell me, in the polarizations in consciousness, if there is any analogy with respect to what you just said in this type of contact with respect to what we are doing right now in communicating with Ra? So Don wants to see if there's a parallel between this negative dark contact with the contact that they're doing. An analogy. And so Ra says there is no relationship between this type of contact and the bidding process. This contact may be characterized as one typical of the brothers and sisters of sorrow, wherein those receiving the contact have attempted to prepare for such contact by sacrificing extraneous self-oriented distortions in order to be of service. So that's them. The Ra social memory complex offers itself also as a function of its desire to serve. Both the caller and the contact are filled with gratitude at the opportunity of serving others. So just to rephrase what Don asked, Don basically wanted to know, is there any similarity between the negative path contact and the positive contact that we're doing here. And Ra says there is no relationship at all in terms of the type of contact and the bidding process, because well, they said this type of contact, the positive contact, and the bidding process, which actually is the negative contact. You know, I am here to become your servant, and Master says, oh yeah, I'm here to enslave you. So that's not what's happening at all here. That's not a bidding process. What's happening here is a master see, nobody is a master or a guru until somebody else says it. You see, nobody can tell you, well, me as a master, I'm going to teach you this, this, and that. No, that's not the way. That's not a true master. That's not a true guru. I don't care. Nobody who wants to teach you something is a master. However, if you feel like you can learn from someone, then that person becomes a master or a teacher. You know, the thing is that we have the word master used for both sides here. Master as a sort of dominating master, or master as a humble teacher. It's two different things, two completely different things. But in both cases, there needs to exist also the caller, somebody who is calling. And so, just to finalize that point, that's not to mean that you don't have teachers, that you don't have guides, that you don't have masters aiding you in the process, but that they're not here imposing their philosophy on you. Rather, they're answering your questions and they're providing information to you. It is you who seek that. If you seek it, then that's fine. If somebody's trying to impose it to you, then question it. Always question it. And I think we can see that in the governments and the whole situation right now in the world. Things that they want to impose on you, you bet that is a negative philosophy. Somebody who is just offering it free, you know, and saying, hey, it's here if you want it, even if you have to pay for it. If you pay for it, I mean, you are valuing what the person has to say. You know, this is truly the whole thing about donations in a church. When they ask you for money, the real thing is that you feel compelled and say, like, this gives me so much service for free that, you know what, here's my donation. Or, you know, I love this person so much that I want to talk to him or her. And that's where you get, you know, consultation with a teacher, which again is not a teacher because he or she says so, but because you say so. And anyhow, I can go on for a while. I can bring in, you know, Buddhism and how it works in terms of the guru, but it's the same process. It's you're a humble servant of the world. And this is what's happening here that Ra explains. In the positive side, Ra says this contact, the Ra contact, may be characterized as one typical of the brothers and sisters of sorrow. These are those of the Confederation who are seeking to aid others, which is the majority, wherein those receiving the contact have attempted to prepare for such contact by sacrificing extraneous self-oriented distortions in order to be of service. That means the group or the person is sacrificing self-pleasure. You know, they Don, Carla, and Jim could have been like, you know what, let's just go to Florida, have fun. I don't know. It was the 80s. What was happening in the 80s? Let's go to discos. Let's go to do LSD and have fun. I don't know. Go play sports. Just, they sacrificed their lives for this contact. So, you know, why? In order to be of service. That's what they did. And in the same way, Ra says that they offer it themselves also as a function of their service to serve. Both the caller and the contact are filled with gratitude at the opportunity of serving others. So Don, Carla, and Jim wanted to serve other people by bringing this content out, this material, and we owe it to them. This video, me and you, me talking, you listening, is thanks to them. Not to Ra initially, but to them who initiated the contact and prepared for that contact, sacrificed themselves Don sacrificed his life, in my view. We'll talk about that in another video. But he sacrificed his life completely to the devotion of this contact. And Carla herself, Jim as well, they did this simply to serve. Nobody in specific, just that. And Ra, they were grateful that they were able to lessen the distortions that they have given here. You see, bringing back the negative part of how a master, a negative contact, comes here and says, oh yeah, I'll become your master, slave. Ra had to face this when they showed themselves here, and people started worshiping them. And in that worship, they said, no, this is not what we want. And they fled. They left. They said, we cannot come here because we will be worshipped. That is not our intent. We're here as humble servants of you. And instead, that's why Ra said that they were faced with the, what's the word they used? Hypocritical scenario of then being worshipped when they came here as servants. So that's why they're filled with gratitude. So Ra says finally here, we may note that this in no way presupposes that either the callers or those of our group in any way approach a perfection or purity such as was described in the bidding process. The calling group may have many distortions and be working with much catalyst, as may those of Ra. The overriding desire to serve others, bonded with the unique harmonics of this group's vibratory complexes, gives us the opportunity to serve as one channel for the one infinite creator. I'm so tempted to finish it here. Actually, there's one more phrase that I didn't read, but I'll read it in a little bit. So I need to make a pause here. First, this shows how much the imperfection of the apparent self. That's the thing. The imperfection. Check this out. Pay attention to this. The imperfections of the apparent self. Who is the apparent self here? Don, Carla, and Jim, and Ra. Ra is an apparent self. Because we're all one. We shouldn't be talking about Ra and me and those of the Orion group. We are all one. However, for concession, language concession, we have to show that we are separate, or play the game that we're separate. And this is why Ra says, we may note that this is in no way, or this in no way presupposes that either the callers, those of NNL research, or those of our group, Ra, in any way approach a perfection, no perfection or purity, such as was described in the bidding process. So for them to establish this contact and to create this harmony, they don't need to be perfect. They may be working with a lot of distortions. Both of them, Ra said here, the overriding desire to serve others, bonded with the unique harmonics of this group's vibratory complexes, gives us the opportunity, this is Ra, to serve as one channel for the one infinite creator. The overriding desire to serve others, bonded with the unique harmonics of the group of NNL research, gives them the opportunity to serve as one channel of God. It's just beautiful. It just shows that, you don't have to be. This is why. Let me go to the negative side before I get to the positive. The negative side, they need to be so absorbed into themselves. They need to be so deluded into believing that they are God. Like they are incarnated here as the maximum God. Like they are going to be, they are Satan, they are Lucifer, they are whatever, incarnated here in one form, and they feel the masters of the universe, and they actually feel disgusted by the little work that they have to do here as humans. And so they do this all by enslaving others and destroying everything because they can, because this is their universe. They have to reach that level of purity. Whereas we, as the positive ones, we don't have to reach a level of purity of the Buddha, for example, which is the highest attainable level of a human can actually achieve. which is just one with everything. It's as opposed to a dilution, is a dissolving of the self into everything. And it's like a little point of consciousness of the universe alive. We don't have to reach that in order to have a contact with other entities. This is because we simply feel that we want to serve others because we feel our unity with them. And instead of feeling, this one separated being, we dissolve into others, and we don't have to be so dissolved to feel unity. So, in any case, this is just beautiful, and I could extend myself here. But the last thing that Ra says, which I'll just read it fast: things come not to those positively oriented, but through such beings. Things come not to those positively oriented, but through such beings. So things do not come to those positively oriented, is what I read here. I don't know, this phrase is a little confusing, if I may be honest. But through such beings, like Ra, they don't come to positive. So basically, everything that comes through to us come through the positive beings, which is unity. Positive beings work in the philosophy of unity. So everything positive that we get is coming through, not from an external source, but through the one source that exists, which is infinity. This is how I interpret this. I don't know. I can't make much sense of this, but just things come not to those positively oriented, but through such beings. Those beings that follow the path of unity. That's how I see it. I don't know. I don't want to derail too much here, but I'm going to cover one more question before we get into pyramids for the next video. Don says, which is just a filler question here. Question 8. Don says, thank you. You stated at an earlier time, until transfers of energy of all types have been experienced and mastered to a great extent, there will be blockages in the blue and indigo radiations. Could you explain that more fully? And Ra says, at this space-time we have not covered the appropriate intermediate material. Please re-question at a more appropriate space-time nexus. And that's it. Don wanted to know about all things that need to be experienced. Until transfers of energy of all types have been experienced and mastered to a great extent, there will be blockages in the blue and indigo radiations. So, until all types of experience and all types of transfers of energy have been experienced. I don't know. We'll wait to see if there is. I don't think they mentioned this again in the raw material. This has to do with the energy centers. I know we talked about this a couple of sessions ago, but Ra doesn't give us anything here to work with. Like, what are all those transfers of energy that we need to experience and master to not have blockages in blue and indigo? Could they be experiences that we have programmed? I don't know. Could they be all the possible experiences? I don't know if that's possible, but if we can reference, say, our Buddhic nature. I always say the Buddha like it was a person. The Buddha is just a representation or a symbol, just like Jesus is not the entity of love. We are all entities of love. We all have that sacred heart, which I love that picture that has Jesus with the sacred heart open in this. I mean, all he's shown is like, we all have hearts, and I'm just a symbol of what it is to use your heart. Unconditional love, compassion, and so on. This is what you are. I don't see you. I remember somebody asked Jesus and called him master, and he said, no, don't call me master, call me a brother, or something like that. And the Buddha is the same thing. It's the Buddhic nature that we have in us. And so if we go to that and we see from Gautama this that he was able to clear all his chakras, then we know that it's possible here. How he did it? Did he experience everything in the universe? through his enlightenment? Did he simply experience all those things he needed to experience here in order to clear all his energy centers? I don't know. And we won't know for now. But what we do know is conclusions. So, we went through the dark side of the Force, like I said. I'm not trying to sound like a nerd. There's actually a lot of parallels between the Star Wars universe and the Dark Force, the dark side of the Force. Force being something neutral. It can be used for good or bad. The Force can be something like intelligent energy, which can be used for negative or for positive. And even those Jedi who call themselves, the righteous Jedis, they were into a lot of dark stuff. And so they depolarized themselves by using the Force in different ways. Especially this little thing and, killing and other stuff. In any case, I'm going completely out of the universe here, literally, to a galaxy far, far away, to a universe far, far away. In any case, conclusions here is that we can use all this information, all the negative information that we're getting in the world, as a way to contrast who we are. What is the path of unity? And individually, I'm always interested in the individual work that we can do. This individual work is represented by how we feel inside with everything that is happening. Are you reacting in a way that separates yourself from others? And if so, that's great. That's great catalyst. That is healthy to do. Do it. Feel it. Go into it. A lot of times when we are presented with that, we kind of brush it aside and say, oh, no, I just can't deal with that. They're just too evil. Or they're very unconscious. People need to wake up and so on. Well, if you're honest with yourself, when you say other people need to wake up, that is to serve your needs. So to me, that is a little dark for you to say other people need to wake up. I used to feel that. I used to think that for this world to change, we needed more people to wake up because we knew that we had to have an awakening. But do we need to force them? I don't think so. I think everybody's in their process and we just need to, see what's going on and how we can be called to service. That is the key thing. So, all this negativity that we're seeing is just how we can channel it to be more in union with them. How can we be of service? The path to unity is a path of service. See how you can serve someone in need. I can go on for a while talking about the different possibilities or examples that we can use for somebody who, we feel they're negative or they're indifferent or they don't care, and how an opportunity of service may present there between the two of you. But this is my best way of transmuting all this negative philosophy that we know exists into something positive that will help us simply be more of service. I think that's the key thing. Be more of service. Dissolving the ego. You do not exist. That's another thing. You can analyze how much you are afraid or how much ego you have because how afraid you are of anything. And as long as you become an instrument for life, doesn't have to be for a higher purpose or anything, just an instrument for life. This is what life wants me to do right now. Cook or help somebody, help my neighbor, or go to a hospital and volunteer myself, or simply, enjoy the breeze of today. Just go and get some sun. Whatever it is, that's service. The best service is the service that you provide to yourself. It's not service to self. It's the best service you provide to yourself, which is healing and becoming harmony. Service to self would be to manipulate others for the ego gain. That's not what I'm talking about here. You understand me because you have been with me for 55 sessions, and you will be with me for the rest 50 sessions or so, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I appreciate your comments, your sharing, your liking, your subscribing. Please, a lot of people come to the channel, watch it, don't subscribe. Why not? Please, just one click. It's not gonna bother you. I mean, I do post a lot of videos. You can turn off the notifications, but subscribe at least. But that's all if you want. It's your free will. In any case, I thank you again for watching. We'll stay in tune. Part 2, session 55.